This story is fiction. Some scenes might be disturbing or not to your liking. Scattered Mirrors. Chapter 1. For 12 p.m. The kettle shrieked once, just once, before Marian reached for it with steady fingers. It was always the same. For 10, the kettle went on. For 11, the cup was steeped. And by 4:12, she was seated by the window, watching him. Her teacup, a cracked porcelain thing with violets painted around the rim, sat untouched on the sill. The steam coiled up toward the glass, ghosting her vision, but she didn't wipe it away. She liked the way it blurred the lines, made everything look softer, almost like a dream. Across the road, just as he always did, Silas Thorne stepped out onto his porch and placed a folded paper on the small table beside his chair. Then he sat down, lit a cigarette, and stared into the fog creeping in from the cliffs. He never looked her way. Not once. Not in 3 months. But she watched him every single day. Marian told herself it wasn't obsession. She wasn't deluded. She never followed him into town. Never tried to talk to him. She didn't even know what his voice sounded like. She only knew what he looked like when he thought no one was watching. He never smiled. He never spoke on the phone, never waved at neighbors. But he wrote letters. Always at the same time. Always alone. And he never mailed them. She once tried to convince herself it was simple curiosity. She'd moved to the small town for the silence, the anonymity, the way people didn't ask too many questions here. They waved at you, but they didn't pry. She liked that. Needed it. Her house sat just a bit uphill from Silas's, tucked behind a lilac hedge and half-eaten by ivy. She'd inherited it from someone she no longer remembered clearly, a great-aunt perhaps. The past was a fog Marian had grown used to walking through, fingers outstretched, hoping not to bump into anything sharp. But Silas, he was sharp. She could feel it even from across the road. Something in him trembled at the edges. A man doesn't write letters to no one unless he's bleeding inside. Today, he didn't write right away. He sat for a long time, cigarette burning down to a stub, fingers twitching on the armrest. His head tilted slightly as if he were listening to something just out of reach. Then slowly, deliberately, he picked up the pen. Marian leaned forward without meaning to, heart tapping at her ribs like a nervous guest. The letter was short today. Only a few lines. When he was done, he folded it, set it aside, and stood. Instead of returning inside immediately, he turned toward the road. Her breath caught. For the briefest second, barely a flicker, his eyes lifted. Not directly at her, but near. Enough to make her lean back from the window, guilty, exposed. But he only lit another cigarette and walked back inside. That night, she couldn't sleep. The image of him looking toward her window replayed over and over in her head. Had he seen her? Did he know? She stood barefoot in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea she'd reheated twice and still hadn't touched. On the table lay a sheet of paper. She hadn't meant to write anything. But when she looked down, her own handwriting stared back at her. I see you. I know how it feels to lose someone who mattered. Let me know if you want to talk. She stared at the words for a long time, not remembering writing them, but not surprised either. The next morning, the letter was sealed in a plain white envelope slipped into his rusted mailbox before dawn. No name. No address. She told herself he wouldn't answer. But at 4:12 p.m. he stepped outside. And the table beside him was empty. No letter. He didn't write one, either. He just sat, smoking, waiting. And this time he looked directly at her window. Chapter 2. The letter was gone. Marian checked the mailbox 3 times that morning, pretending to pick flowers on the roadside. There were no bees yet. It was too early in the season, but she plucked wild asters anyway, their purple heads trembling as if they knew something she didn't. The mailbox was empty. No reply. Of course not. What had she expected? A thank you? A confession? An invitation? She told herself the silence was enough, that she had no right to ask for more. She was a stranger. A silhouette in a window, a ghost in someone else's story. Still, when 4:12 came, her body moved without thinking. Window. Wait, and there he was. But this time, Silas didn't sit down. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, cigarette unlit between his fingers. A gust of wind tousled his dark hair, but he made no move to smooth it. His gaze was fixed on the road. And then, without pretense or ceremony, he crossed it. Marian's breath hitched. She stood frozen behind the curtains, unsure whether to hide or stay visible. Her tea trembled in her hands. Her legs suddenly felt made of twine. He didn't come to her door. Instead, he placed an envelope into her mailbox. Simple, white, no markings. And then, without looking up, without hesitating, he turned and walked back to his house. He didn't check to see if she was watching. He didn't need to. She didn't open it right away. She waited until nightfall after she had bolted the doors and drawn every curtain tight. Even then, she didn't tear the envelope open. She peeled it slowly, carefully, like skin that didn't want to bleed. The handwriting was neat, unadorned. Masculine but not rushed. You said you know what it's like to lose someone who mattered. Then tell me. Do you remember their voice? Or only the silence they left behind? That was all. No name. No signature. No warmth, no threat. But something about it made her hands go cold. She didn't sleep again that night. Instead, she sat by the window and read the letter 5 more times, her lips silently mouthing the words until they no longer sounded like English. What did he mean? Do you remember their voice? Of course she did. She remembered her father's voice, stern but kind. Her sister's, high and laughing. Her lover's? No. She stopped there. There was a lover, wasn't there? She remembered hands. A scent. The heat of something pressed against her spine in the dark. But no name. No voice. Just the aftermath. Like waking from a fire and finding nothing but smoke. The next morning, she wrote back. I remember fragments. The way their fingers curled when they were angry. The way they never used coasters. The way they said just one more day, like it was a promise they could keep. I don't remember the voice, only how much I miss it. She walked across the road at dawn and slipped it into his mailbox. This time, her hands didn't shake. 3 days passed. No letter came. At 4:12, Silas sat outside again. He didn't smoke. He didn't write. He only stared at the road, his eyes far away, as though he were waiting for something to rise out of it like mist. On the 4th day, he wrote a letter. She didn't see him deliver it. It was just there the next morning, tucked in her mailbox like a secret. You write like someone who has lied to herself for a long time. I wonder what you've chosen to forget. Do you? Marian folded the letter twice before hiding it under her mattress. That night, she dreamed of a white room with no doors. She was standing in the center, surrounded by voices she couldn't place. Whispers dripping from the walls like condensation. She kept turning, trying to find their source, but all she saw were mirrors. And in every mirror, she wasn't alone. A man stood behind her, but in each one his face was different. Smiling, crying, bleeding, burning. And in one of them, in only one, he was looking directly at her. She woke before dawn, breath tight, throat dry. She walked to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and stared into the mirror. And for just a heartbeat, just one flickering moment, she could swear someone else blinked. Chapter 3. The mall smelled like old linoleum, too much sugar, and the sickly sweetness of cheap perfume. It shouldn't have existed here, not in a foggy cliffside town with more graves than schools. But it did, half alive, like a relic from some other decade refusing to die. Marian hadn't planned to come. She hated the place. It was loud, echoing, fluorescent. Too many faces. Too many reflections in dirty glass storefronts. But the kettle had broken that morning. A trivial reason. A real one. She walked past shuttered toy shops and discount clothing stores, ignoring the sound of laughter in the food court. Her steps echoed. Her eyes scanned every window, searching for nothing and everything. She stopped at a tea shop she didn't remember. And then she saw her. The girl was seated at a round table in the center of the shop. Late 20s, maybe? Pale. Heavy bangs curtained her eyes, but Marian could see them. Wide, glassy, and unmistakably familiar. The girl smiled when she saw her. Marian didn't smile back. Something deep in her stomach twisted like a key turning. You always did like chamomile, the girl said brightly. Marian froze. Her throat closed around a reply that refused to come. The girl stood, walked over. You don't remember me, do you? I'm sorry, Marian managed. Should I? The girl tilted her head. Not really your fault, I guess. There was silence. Thick. It buzzed behind Marian's eyes. Can I sit with you? The girl asked, already doing it. It's been a while. Thought you disappeared. Marian's pulse stuttered. Who are you? She asked. The girl smiled again, but this time it was sad. Too sad for someone who was just meeting an old friend. You really don't remember. Then quietly, God, you did it. They sat across from each other at the table. The tea was too hot. Marian wrapped her hands around it anyway, needing the burn to anchor her. I'm Claire, the girl said finally. We were roommates. For a while. You left in the middle of the night after what happened. What happened? Marian's voice was nearly inaudible. Claire's eyes sharpened. You really don't remember anything? I remember cliffs. A storm. A letter. Claire's expression faltered. Jesus. Okay. She leaned forward. Do you remember Jonah? The name hit like a dropped plate. Marian blinked. Once. Twice. Claire didn't wait. You loved him. He loved you. But he wasn't well, Marian. You kept trying to fix him. He'd disappear for days. Write these insane letters. You thought he was trying to hurt himself. The letters. The tea spilled slightly over Marian's trembling hands, but she didn't notice. You told me he was in your head. That you couldn't tell if the things he said were real or dreams. You said Claire stopped, looked away. You said he looked at you like he was waiting for you to break. Something inside Marian's chest shifted. Like a door unlocking in a room she didn't want to re-enter. Claire, she whispered. He's across from my house. Claire's head snapped up. What? Every day. For 12, he writes letters. He stares. He knows things. Marian, Jonah's dead. The mall disappeared around her. The lights blurred. The hum of the espresso machine roared like a hurricane. The people turned to shadows. All that remained was Claire's face, pale, wide-eyed, horrified. I saw him. Impossible. I wrote to him. He wrote back. Claire reached across the table and grabbed her hands. Listen to me. Jonah killed himself 2 years ago. He jumped from the cliffs. You were the one who found him. No, Marian whispered. Yes. You disappeared after the funeral. You left your job. Your apartment. I thought you'd done the same thing. But you didn't. You came here and started over. Claire was crying now. She didn't try to hide it. Whatever you're seeing, she said, it's not him. Or it is, but not how you think. Marian, you told me once that if you couldn't save him, you'd find a way to rewrite it. You'd pretend. You'd do anything not to remember what really happened. The sound of waves slammed into Marian's ears. The cliffs. The mirror. The letter under the mattress. And the man across the street with Jonah's face. Claire stood. I need to go. Please get help. You don't have to live in this story anymore. She left without another word. Marian didn't move for a long time. When she did, she walked out of the mall, stepped into the gray fog, and went home. The clock read 4:11 when she sat down by the window. And right on time, the front door of the house across the road creaked open. Silas stepped out. Only this time, he didn't sit. He didn't write. He looked straight at her window and held up something between his fingers. A white envelope. He smiled. And this time, he waved. Chapter 4. The envelope sat untouched on the kitchen table for over an hour. Marian didn't want to touch it. Not because she was afraid of what it would say, but because she feared it wouldn't say anything at all. The way Silas, Jonah, had waved, that smile, that wasn't a man watching from afar anymore. That was someone stepping into her story like he had always belonged there. Like he was done being just a memory or a hallucination. He wanted her attention, and now he had it. Finally, with fingers still damp from washing them a second, third time, she opened the envelope. It was blank. No handwriting. No lines. Not even a crease in the page. Just a clean, bone-white sheet of paper. But as she turned it under the light, something shimmered faintly. She moved it closer to the lamp. Invisible ink. Marian blinked. Her mind raced. She went to the drawer, pulled out a candle, lit it with trembling hands, and held the page above the flame just as she remembered doing in school once, 100 years ago in a life that wasn't quite hers. And slowly, letter by letter, the message bloomed like a wound across the page. You let them tell you I died. You let them bury me in a version of your life that was easier to live with. But you never came to the cliffs to see what was left. Come now. Come alone. Bring the mirror. She dropped the page. The edge was lightly scorched. A mirror? Marian backed away from the table like it might reach for her. Her breathing quickened. The dreams. The reflections. The man behind her that only appeared when she wasn't looking at herself. The mirror. There was only one mirror in her house she never uncovered. The tall antique one in the hallway closet, the one she'd locked away months ago after a particularly long stretch of sleepless nights. She remembered the way it made her feel when she passed it. Not like she was being watched. Like she was being remembered. Night fell and she didn't light the lamps. She sat in the dark, the letter beside her like an open mouth whispering what she tried so hard to forget. At some point, she must have fallen asleep because when she woke, the sun was bleeding orange through the window and someone was knocking on her door. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 more. Not the rhythm of a delivery man. Not the pattern of a neighbor. She opened the door. But no one was there. Only another letter on the step. No envelope. Folded, slightly crumpled, as though someone had held it too tightly before letting it go. She picked it up. You asked what was real, Marian. But that was never the right question. The better question is, who has more to lose if you remember? Her blood ran cold. Because now it wasn't just about Jonah or Silas or the man across the road. Now the spotlight turned inward. Toward Claire. Toward the neighbors who always averted their eyes. Toward the gaps in Marian's past she'd never questioned too closely. Maybe the real problem hadn't been Jonah after all. Maybe he'd been trying to get free. And maybe, just maybe, Claire's tears at the mall weren't guilt. They were fear. Because if Marian remembered what she had buried, everything would come undone. She stood, walked to the closet, and pulled out the mirror. It was taller than she remembered. The glass was dusty, but the reflection beneath was still sharp, waiting. She looked into it and for the first time didn't see herself. She saw the cliffs. She saw a man standing at the edge. And behind him, someone was pushing. Chapter 5. The cliffs had not changed. Marian stood at the edge as the wind howled like it had the day she forgot, sharp, slicing, full of salt and secrets. Sea spray clung to her coat. Her boots pressed into the damp earth, one step from the drop. The mirror was heavy in her arms. She had wrapped it in cloth, not to protect it, but to dull the weight of what it meant. It throbbed with a kind of presence now, as if it, too, remembered what she had spent years suppressing. The last letter had said, "Come now. Bring the mirror." And so she came. Alone, but not unobserved. She felt it before she saw him, movement in the periphery. A shape, a shadow, walking the cliffs like he'd never left. Silas. Or Jonah. Or whoever he truly was. He stood several feet away. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make her heart forget how to beat. He looked exactly the same. Eyes like distant shorelines. That same threadbare coat, sleeves too long. The faint curve of a smile, not kind, not cruel, but knowing. "Hello again, Marian," he said. Her voice caught, then returned, raw and brittle. "You're not real. That's what you chose to believe? You're dead." "I was." She didn't step forward. "I saw you fall," she said. No, he interrupted. "You saw what they wanted you to see." Marian's fingers tightened on the mirror's frame. "Who are they?" He smiled more fully this time. "But not for her. For you to remember that," he said, "you have to stop hiding." He pointed to the mirror. "Show me what you brought." Her legs moved before her mind agreed. She set the mirror down carefully, unwrapping it as the wind whipped her hair into her face. When the last layer of cloth dropped, she expected a reflection. There was none. Only the cliffs, the sky, and in the center, the younger Marian. Fragile, haunted, standing over a man curled on the ground. It wasn't Silas. It was Jonah, bloody, breathing, bruised. He was looking up at someone. Marian turned. Claire. Her hands were red, not with Jonah's blood, with ink. She was holding a fountain pen, uncapped, dripping like a knife freshly used. She whispered something to Marian's younger self, who nodded numbly. The scene shifted, flickered. Now Jonah was on the edge of the cliff, dazed. Claire was behind him, gripping his shoulder, pushing. He stumbled. He didn't fall. He looked at Marian one last time before vanishing into the sea. She staggered back from the mirror, gasping. Jonah didn't jump. Claire pushed him, and she, Marian, had let herself forget it. Not because she wanted to, because Claire made her. She remembered now. The sedatives, the whispered reassurances, that you're not well. The way Claire had burned the letters. The way she cried when Marian asked questions she shouldn't have remembered. She remembered screaming he was trying to get away. And Claire saying, "No, Marian. He was dangerous. You're safe now." Safe in a lie. Behind her, Silas stepped closer. "Why?" Marian whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "Why would she do that?" Silas spoke with ice behind each word. "She loved you. Not the way you think." The weight of it crushed Marian's chest. She couldn't breathe. Claire had loved her. Obsessively. Delusionally. Jonah saw it, warned her. That's why he wrote the letters. That's why he ran. And Claire had made him a villain, painting herself as the savior. She gasped. "She's still watching me. She came to the mall." Silas nodded. "She came to make sure you didn't remember. She's afraid you'll tell someone what she did." Marian turned to the mirror. This time, her own reflection stared back, haunted, aged, but whole. She picked it up, walked to the very edge of the cliff, and let the mirror fall. It shattered on the rocks below. "I remember now," she said. Silas stepped beside her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was calm, real. "I can't go back, can I?" she asked. "You don't have to," he said. "Then what do I do?" "You choose what story to live in now," he said quietly. "Not the one Claire wrote for you." He reached into his coat, handed her one final letter. The seal was unbroken. She opened it. Inside, one sentence. "Now that you've remembered, it's her turn to forget." Chapter 6. Marian didn't knock. The front door to Claire's house was still painted robin's egg blue, chipped now, worn like the truth. It creaked open under her hand and Marian stepped into the silence she hadn't dared enter for a long time. It smelled the same. Lemongrass and lavender, like always. Too clean. Like nothing bad had ever happened inside these walls. But it had. And it would again tonight. Claire stood in the kitchen. She didn't flinch. Didn't speak. She was holding a teacup like she'd been waiting. Dressed perfectly, hair pinned, not a line out of place. As if she'd never knelt beside a bleeding man on the cliffs, whispering that Marian would never have to choose again. Marian stepped closer. "I remember everything." Claire's knuckles whitened around the cup. "I hoped you wouldn't." Marian stopped a few feet away, heart thudding. "You killed him," she said. Claire looked at her for a long moment, then gently set the teacup down and said, "No, Marian. You did." The words slapped the air between them. Marian flinched. "That's a lie." Claire stepped around the counter slowly, deliberately. "You brought him there. You told him you'd run away with him." You kissed him just before I arrived. And when he tried to take you by the hand, you pulled away. Her voice trembled, not from fear. From rage hidden under silk. You froze. And when I reached for you, he panicked. He thought I was going to hurt you. He shoved me. Marian's lips parted, remembering something, just barely. A scuffle. Claire falling. Blood on a rock. And then Claire whispered, you screamed. You screamed like I was the monster. And he backed away. Lost his footing. A pause. And you just stood there. No, Marian shook her head. You pushed him. I protected you. He was trying to protect me. Claire's face cracked. From what? From me? I gave up everything for you. I never asked you to. Liar. Claire's scream echoed off the walls. You looked at me like I was your world, Marian. You let me believe. No, Marian snapped, stepping forward. You believed what you wanted. You twisted everything until it fit your little fantasy. And you ran when it got hard, Claire spat. You left me alone with the mess you made. You drugged me, Marian hissed. You told them I broke. You told them I couldn't be trusted. You rewrote me. Claire was shaking now, wild eyes glassy. You couldn't live with the truth. So I carried it for you. They stood inches apart now, breathing hard, years of lies unraveling between them like thread from a torn dress. I loved you, Claire whispered. Marian's eyes filled with tears, but not from sorrow. From fury. No, Claire. You wanted to possess me. That's not love. Claire's face crumpled, but her next words came sharp, cruel. I buried the part of you that made you dangerous. That's what you are, Marian. Dangerous. You destroyed him. And now you're here to destroy me. She smiled bitterly. Go ahead. Add another body to your past. It's already soaked in red. And then she said it, words so venomous they didn't echo. They stuck. He didn't fall. You let him go. Marian didn't think. Didn't plan. Her hand found the letter opener on the counter, silver, thin, sharp. Claire saw the flash of metal and laughed. A high cracked sound. Will they believe you now, Marian? After everything? Who's twisted now? And Marian drove it forward. Into Claire's stomach. The laughter died in a choke. Claire's body folded against her like a child collapsing into their mother's arms. Marian held her, trembling. Claire looked up, blood on her lips. I saved you, she said faintly. Marian pulled away. Claire dropped to the floor. Silence. Only the sound of the kettle clicking off in the background. Marian stumbled back, heart pounding. The world spun sideways. She hadn't meant to. Or maybe she had. But what chilled her more than the blood soaking into the floorboards was the mirror behind Claire's dining room table. Still intact. Still facing her. And in the reflection, Claire was still standing, smiling, behind her. Chapter 7. Blood on the floor. But no body. Marian stared at the empty spot, heart stammering like it had seen a ghost. Because maybe it had. The blood was still fresh, the trail leading nowhere, just vanishing mid-plank. Claire had been there. Marian had felt her, stabbed her. And then, nothing. Except the mirror. Its frame shimmered faintly in the dim kitchen light, like oil on water. It reflected the dining table, the teacup still untouched. And Claire, standing behind Marian, smiling. She spun around. Nothing. But in the mirror, Claire remained. Same blood-stained blouse, same glassy eyes. But different now. Her smile was too wide. Her limbs moved with marionette grace, not quite human. And as Marian watched, Claire lifted one hand and tapped on the inside of the mirror. Once. Twice. Tap. Tap. Then she whispered something. The sound came not from her mouth, but inside Marian's head. You didn't kill me. You let me in. Marian stumbled backward, her breath catching on air. The mirror darkened like water taking ink. Claire's figure fading into the void. And then, bang, 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 the front door. She jumped. Another knock, harder this time. Desperate. She ran down the hallway, yanked it open. And there stood Silas. Out of breath. Mud on his boots. A thin gash across his cheek like he'd been running through brambles. Or worse. Thank God, he said, stepping in quickly. You're not too late. She blinked. Too late for what? He closed the door behind him, eyes scanning the house with urgency. She's not Claire anymore, he said. At least, not all of her. Marian's throat tightened. You saw her. He nodded. She was in my room. My old room. Writing your name into the walls. She's dead, Marian whispered, half hopeful. He met her gaze. She's splintered, he said quietly. Half in this world. Half in the mirror. They walked back into the kitchen. The mirror now showed only their reflections. But Marian didn't trust it. It was waiting. Silas crouched and inspected the blood. You stabbed her, didn't you? She said I let him fall, Marian whispered. He looked up. And you believed her? Marian stared at the mirror. I don't know. Silas stood slowly. That's what she does. Twists memory. Bends it around guilt. She'll weaponize the things you regret. He stepped closer. That mirror wasn't just a window, Marian. It's a door. And when you smashed the one on the cliff, it didn't break, it opened. She said I let her in. You did. But you can still shut her out. How? He turned to her, solemn. You killed a part of her still tethered to this world. Marion frowned. You said I already did. Not her body, Silas said. Her anchor. Something she left behind. Something she used to rewrite you. A pause. Realization. The letters, Marion whispered. Silas nodded. She never burned them all. They went upstairs. Marion's old room. It was untouched exactly as she left it years ago. Except for one drawer, half open, lined with lavender sachets. Inside, wrapped in a ribbon. Letters. Dozens. All from Claire. All beginning with, you may not remember, but... Silas carefully unrolled one. I keep you in my memories because it's safer than letting you be free. If you ever leave me again, I'll take the memory of him, too. You won't even feel the hole. Marion's knees buckled. She remembered reading those. Or maybe believing she had. Claire must have read them to her, night after night. When she was medicated. Numb. She didn't erase my memories, Marion whispered. She rewrote them. With ink and guilt, Silas said. That's what gave her power over you. Marion stood. Then we burned them. They lit the fireplace. One by one, Marion tossed the letters in. Each one curled and blackened, the ink turning to smoke. The flames grew higher. Hotter. And then... The mirror in the kitchen cracked. A long, jagged fracture across its center. Marion and Silas raced down. Claire's face had returned, but it was screaming. Silent, furious, distorted. She pressed both palms to the glass as the crack spread. Her voice rang out once more inside Marion's head. You always choose to forget. Marion whispered back, tears in her eyes. No. This time I remember. And the mirror shattered. Glass fell like rain across the kitchen floor. And Claire's presence was gone. Silence again. Except... a single folded note remained on the table. Untouched. It was not burned. It was not one of Claire's. It was written in a shaky, familiar hand. Silas picked it up. To Marion, it said, If you're reading this, I made it through. There was never just one of me. You only ever saw the version she let you see. Find me. Before she does again. Jay. Marion looked at Silas. He's alive. Silas blinked. I thought he was dead. So did I, she whispered. But now she wasn't so sure. Chapter 8. The fire had gone out. All that remained were embers and the letter. Jonah's letter. Marion held it with trembling fingers, heart thudding in her ears. Silas hadn't spoken since they'd read it, just stared into the ashes, his expression unreadable. She turned to him. What if he's alive, she asked softly. Silas finally looked up. Then we need to find him before she does. His words made sense. His tone was calm. But something in his eyes had changed, too steady, too rehearsed. And too late. Because now that Claire's grip was weakening, the fog in Marion's head had started to clear. She remembered things. Things Silas never should have known. He had known where the letters were. He had known Claire's words. He had known about the mirror before they broke it. But she hadn't told him. Not all of it. She looked at Silas again. He hadn't reacted to that part. Like he'd expected it. Her breath caught. Why didn't you burn all the letters, she asked suddenly. Silas blinked. What? You knew where they were. You knew what they meant. Why didn't you burn them after I left? A pause. Then a smile. Too slow. Too small. You think I didn't? He stepped toward her. I saved you, Marion. I came back when no one else did. You came back after Claire was gone, she said quietly. Why not before? Silas didn't answer. The silence screamed louder than words. Marion reached into the pocket of her coat, her fingers closing around the handle of the letter opener. She'd kept it since Claire vanished. Just in case. Where is he? She asked, voice steady now. Silas tilted his head. Who? You know who? He sighed, slow and patient, like she was a child who just didn't understand. I didn't want to hurt you. Then don't lie. His expression darkened. I was helping you. I've always been helping you. By rewriting my memories? Just like Claire. She taught me how. But I refined it. He took another step forward. She used ink. I used trust. It lasts longer. Marion didn't hesitate. She pulled the letter opener and drove it forward. Right into Silas's side. His eyes widened, not with pain but disappointment. You always destroy the people who love you, he said softly. As blood bloomed across his shirt, she yanked the blade free. You don't love me, she whispered. You loved the version of me you needed. He crumpled slowly to the floor, breath catching. Just like Claire. Marion didn't look away. I'm done needing ghosts. She turned, heart pounding. Her hands shook, coated in blood. And there, standing just beyond the hallway, half in shadow, Jonah, alive, wearing a faded gray hoodie, eyes wide, fragile. He whispered. Her knees gave out. She collapsed into him, sobbing as he held her like she was made of something breakable but worth saving. How? She choked. I ran. He whispered into her hair. I tried to come back for you, but she got to everyone before I could. He glanced down the hallway, where Silas lay still. She got to him too. Marian nodded. I know. Jonah pulled back just enough to look her in the eye. She's not gone, Em. She's just hiding again. Waiting. In the mirror? In someone, he said. And then, his voice trembling. We might not be looking at Claire anymore. We might be looking through her. Chapter 9. Jonah's hand was warm in hers. Familiar. Comforting. But Marian could barely feel it. Everything in her chest felt scrambled, like wires crossed and sparking. Her legs moved forward as Jonah led her down the overgrown path behind the house, the one that led nowhere. The one that was never really there. That's when she noticed it. The pattern. They were walking in circles. The trees. The air. The stillness. They passed the same crooked signpost 3 times, but Jonah didn't flinch. Jonah, she asked. He didn't answer. Her voice caught in her throat. Why are we going in circles? He squeezed her hand. We're not. You are. Marian stopped walking. What does that mean? Jonah turned to face her. His expression was different now, gentler, sadder. Like he was about to say something that would break her. You're trying to remember something that doesn't want to be remembered. Her pulse quickened. What? He let go of her hand. You didn't forget what they did to you, Em. You chose to forget. The trees around them shimmered for a second like ripples across glass. And then, Jonah flickered. Like a reflection in water. Like a copy of a memory. Like a layer. And standing just behind him, no, within him, was Silas. His face superimposed over Jonah's. Eyes flickering. Mouth twisted. Marian blinked hard. No. Jonah again. She stepped back. What's happening? You're starting to see, Jonah said softly. What they buried. He stepped forward and so did Silas. Perfectly mirrored. Their bodies moved together. Their voices blended. We were never two people, they said in unison. You split us in your mind. Marian shook her head. No, that's not. But it was. Images flooded her. Jonah laughing in the park. Silas fixing her broken window. Jonah reading poetry. Silas sketching her face. One hand. One voice. One presence. 2 names. A lie. You killed Jonah, Claire had said. You let him fall. But what if she didn't? What if she just couldn't face what really happened? Jonah stepped closer. No, Silas. No, both. You fractured us to survive, they said. Half of me was safe. The other guilty? You loved one. You punished the other. I don't understand, Marian choked. And then the voice inside her whispered. You never lost Jonah. You broke him. The mirror hadn't split reality. She had. Back when the guilt first set in. When Claire began whispering. When she needed someone to blame. She created Silas to hold the guilt. And Jonah to hold the love. And now they were merging. Becoming whole again. She fell to her knees, holding her head. I didn't mean to. You were a child, they said. And she twisted everything. She made you think love had to be earned through pain. She sobbed into her palms. So what am I now? Who am I without this? Silence. Then, you're the one who has to choose which version to keep. She looked up. And there they were, Jonah and Silas, standing side by side now, but bleeding into one another like ink in water. Same face. Same eyes. Only their posture told them apart. One full of warmth. The other still bleeding. You have to let one of us go, they said. And Marian finally understood. She couldn't keep both. The world twisted. Marian's head pounded as though 1,000 clocks had cracked inside her skull. The voices of Silas and Jonah, or whoever they were, blurred into echoes as a sharp pressure filled her nose. She gasped, tilting her head slightly, and saw a crimson drop splatter across her palm. Blood. More followed, thick and warm, trickling from her nose, painting her hand in vivid red. Her knees buckled. Everything spun. And then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, the sky was clearer than it had been in years. Summer. Birds chirped. The air smelled like cut grass and fresh pavement. She blinked slowly, heart hammering, and looked around. A courtyard. A school bell rang in the distance. And beside her, Claire, giggling, tossing her notebook into her bag, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, eyes glowing with mischief and sincerity. Come on, Mare. We're gonna miss the film club again. Claire laughed, tugging Marian's arm. Marian's breath caught. Claire was alive, vibrant, whole, and she didn't look at her like she was broken. Claire, Marian whispered, throat dry. Who else? Claire said, rolling her eyes playfully. Did you forget your own best friend? Marian couldn't speak. This wasn't a memory. This was before. Before the obsession. Before the mirror. Before Jonah. And she She was still the old Marion. Not yet twisted. Not yet lost. That's when he arrived. Marion turned and saw Jonah for the first time again sitting on the edge of the fountain across the courtyard, head tilted back as he laughed at something someone said. His eyes crinkled in that lazy, half-lidded way that always made him look like he saw right through people but chose to be kind anyway. Claire noticed her looking. "Oh, you like him," Claire whispered with a nudge. "That's Jonah. He just transferred." Marion smiled weakly. "He seems nice." Claire grinned. "More than nice. I think he might be my type." Marion blinked, and something inside her cracked. Weeks passed in a blur. In this dream, or memory, or both, Marion watched as Claire and Jonah grew close. She was there for it all, their long walks home, the group projects, the lunches they started sharing without her. At first, Marion tried to be happy. Claire was her best friend. If she was smiling, if she was glowing, that was what mattered, right? But then Jonah started looking at Claire the way Marion wanted someone to look at her. And each time he smiled at Claire, Marion felt something in her chest wither. She began changing. Slowly. Subtly. Her clothes got flashier. Her laugh louder. She mirrored Claire's mannerisms at first, then improved on them. She waited for moments Jonah would be alone. She'd say things like, "Claire's really intense sometimes, huh? She can be a little dramatic, don't you think?" Jonah would always gently defend Claire. And that infuriated Marion more than anything. It came to a head during the winter festival. Claire came to Marion first, cheeks pink from the cold, smiling with uncontainable joy. "He asked me to be his girlfriend," Claire whispered, squeezing her hand. Marion forced a smile so tight it hurt. "That's amazing," she said. But her mind whispered, "Should have been me." From that moment on, her entire world narrowed. Claire became the obstacle. The wall between her and what she believed was meant to be hers. Marion wasn't just jealous. She was convinced. Jonah was hers. Chapter 10. She planted seeds of doubt. Quiet suggestions. Subtle sabotage. A word here. A glance there. She told Claire that Jonah had been talking to other girls. That he was distant. That maybe he wasn't being honest. Claire, hurt and confused, confronted Jonah. He denied it. Of course he did. But the doubt festered. And Marion? She fed it. Jonah confronted her. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, eyes stormy with betrayal. "I'm not," Marion said sweetly. "I just don't want her to get hurt." He looked at her like he was seeing something dark. Something dangerous. "You're not helping her," he said. "You're tearing her apart." But by then it was too late. Claire was unraveling. And Marion was ready to finish what she started. That night, Marion remembered it now, finally remembered. Claire had found her journal. The one she thought was hidden. Inside were pages detailing every move she'd made. Every manipulation. Every encounter with Jonah. Every fantasy. Every twisted justification. Claire had come to confront her. Tears streaming down her face. "You're sick, Marion." "I love him," Marion shouted. "You don't deserve him. You treat love like it's yours to give and take." "But I've bled for it." Claire backed away. "You tried to ruin my life. All because you're lonely? Because you can't handle someone else being happy? You stole him from me." "No, you never had him." That was the last thing Claire ever said. Marion's hands reached for something. Anything. And then she saw it. The sharp edge of the broken mirror from the hallway Claire had stormed into. And then, red. On her hands. On the floor. On Claire. Eyes wide. Still. No more words. Just silence. Marion jolted awake, gasping. Her body was drenched in sweat. Hair matted to her forehead. Blood still crusted beneath her nose. The world was spinning. But one thing was clear. Claire hadn't cursed her. She had cursed herself. She had rewritten her own story to survive what she'd done. Jonah. Silas. The mirror. They were just fragments of the guilt she couldn't face. And now it was coming back together. Chapter 11. Marion wandered aimlessly through the fog of her waking world, but it no longer felt like reality. After her fainting spell, she had dragged herself home. Or what resembled home. She hadn't seen Jonah. Or Silas. She wasn't even sure if they were real anymore. Two mirrors of the same face, bending the edge of reality, warping everything she thought she understood. Were they even separate? Were they ever? She collapsed on the couch, still clutching the dried blood on her hands, her head pounding like it had been carved open and stitched with barbed wire. A silence fell in the room. Too deep. Too hollow. She closed her eyes, thinking sleep might grant her mercy. Instead, the dream returned. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't just a replay. It was a sentence. A punishment. She was there in their dormitory. The lights were dim. Everything smelled of petrichor and iron. Her hands trembled as she looked down at them. Red. Thick. Warm. All over her fingers. all over the floor, all over Claire. She wasn't moving. Claire's eyes, wide with shock, had frozen in that last instant. Not fear, not hate, just disbelief. A betrayal too large to fit in her final breath. Marian couldn't cry, couldn't scream. She just sat there. The broken mirror shimmered behind her, catching fragments of her distorted reflection. Then came the footsteps, rushing, panicked. Claire. Jonah's voice, the same one that once made her heart flutter. He dropped to his knees beside the body. His fingers grasped Claire's wrists. No, no, please, Claire? Marian remained motionless, her limbs heavy as stone, eyes glazed over. Jonah looked up at her, blood on his hands now too, his face twisted in something primal. Grief, fury, horror. What did you do? He whispered. Marian tilted her head, and then she smiled. I did it for us, she said softly. She was in the way. Now we can be together. There's no one else. Jonah's mouth opened, but no words came. Only silence. And the trembling press of numbers on his phone as he called for help. Police. Ambulance. Sirens. The sound split the world in half. She didn't fight the arrest. Didn't speak when the police came. Not when they cuffed her. Not when they read her rights. Not when they put her in the holding cell. She just sat dazed and floating as though trapped in syrup-thick air. Days passed. Or weeks. Marian couldn't tell anymore. Jonah and Claire's family pressed charges. Murder. Premeditated. He testified with a voice of broken glass and swallowed hate. Claire's family sat in the courtroom, hands clenched, faces pale with mourning. The courtroom was cold, stiff with judgment. But Marian still didn't talk. Until the 5th day. A doctor asked her, "Why did you do it?" She turned, looked at the ceiling for a moment, then whispered. Because she wasn't supposed to be there. He was mine. I took her out for us. Doesn't that matter? The doctor took a sharp breath. There was no remorse in her eyes. Only devotion, twisted and pure. They didn't call her insane, just dangerous. But Marian was clever, quiet, careful. A week before the trial's final verdict, she manipulated a junior officer. Coaxed him with her charm, her sob stories, the wet eyes that made her look small and tragic. The officer slipped, gave her too much freedom, and she vanished. She found Jonah that night, by the cliff near the old coastal lookout, the place where they once walked during school trips, where Claire once took pictures of him when she thought no one was watching. He was there now, alone, hunched over the railing, breathing in the stormy air. Marian stepped from the trees, quiet as a shadow. Jonah turned. His face hardened the moment he saw her. I should have known you'd come here. I had to talk to you, Marian said gently. You should be in prison. I broke out, she whispered with a tilt of her head. For you. Jonah took a step back, wary. You don't get it, do you? He snapped. You ruined everything. You murdered your best friend. She betrayed me, Marian said, voice cold. She took what was mine. She didn't take anything. I never loved you, Marian. Never. That's when her eyes dimmed. The hope extinguished like a candle snuffed by wind. She reached inside her coat. Jonah's eyes widened. Marian, don't. But the knife was already out. Fast. Clean. Cruel. She lunged forward and plunged the blade into his side. Jonah gasped, stumbling backward, clutching his wound. Blood seeped through his fingers. But Marian wasn't done. With tears in her eyes, real ones, she whispered. If I can't have you, no one can. Then, with one strong push, she sent him over the edge. His scream echoed across the cliffside, then vanished into the crashing waves below. She ran, fled into the forest, abandoned the name Marian. The girl she once was had shattered into 100 glass shards. She changed her hair, stole identities, hitchhiked buses, hid in alleyways and train stations. Eventually, she made it to another city, a place where faces blurred and anonymity was a currency. There, she lived in shadows, day by day, looking over her shoulder, waiting for Jonah's ghost to return. Or worse, waiting for herself to be real again. Chapter 12. Knock. 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 The sound dragged Marian from the pit of her dreamless, heavy sleep. Her heart thudded against her ribs as if she had been running. Her limbs were drenched in sweat, fingers clenched around the coarse blanket she didn't remember pulling over herself. Her mouth was dry and her head felt like it had been stuffed with wool and static. Knock. Knock. She sat up with a groan, clutching her forehead. Dizziness swirled behind her eyes. Her dreams had fled the moment she opened them, but something dark and cold still sat in her chest like leftover smoke after a fire. She shuffled to the door of the small apartment. A low creak escaped from the old floorboards beneath her bare feet. Her vision was still foggy as she twisted the lock and pulled open the door a few inches. A pair of kindly gray eyes met hers. "Good morning, dear," said the elderly woman standing on the doorstep, hands clasped politely in front of her. She wore a knitted shawl, the edges slightly frayed, and a wide-brimmed hat that made her look like someone who had stepped out of a time before city lights and blaring sirens. Marian blinked a few times, straightening. "Yes." Her voice was hoarse and used. "I hope I'm not bothering you too early," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Mrs. Alden. I live down the street. We're organizing a small block gathering this weekend, a potluck sort of thing. Just a way to meet the newer folks in the neighborhood. And I figured I'd drop off a flyer and say hello in person." She handed over a neatly folded paper with elegant script and pastel flower borders. Marian took it absently. "I thank you," she said, trying to pull herself together. Mrs. Alden tilted her head, studying her face. "You look pale, dear. Are you all right?" "Yes," Marian replied, perhaps too quickly. "Just not a morning person." "Well," Mrs. Alden chuckled, "neither am I, truth be told. But sometimes the early hours tell you things the night kept hidden." Marian offered a smile, one she had practiced over and over again since she arrived in the city. It pulled at the edges of her mouth but didn't reach her eyes. I'll try to come." "Thank you." The older woman beamed. "Lovely. It's Sunday at noon, right in front of the community garden. We'll have music and some homemade pies. Nothing fancy." Marian nodded. Mrs. Alden turned to leave, but paused after a few steps and glanced over her shoulder. Mrs. Alden smiled again, this time with a flicker of something unreadable in her gaze. Then she walked away, disappearing into the sidewalk stream of city bustle like a page turned and forgotten. Marian closed the door gently and leaned against it, still holding the flyer. Her fingers clenched it until it crumpled. Then, without a word, she went to the bathroom. Her face in the mirror looked like it belonged to someone else. Pale, hollowed, haunted. The name Marian seemed to drift behind her like a ghost. She was Eva now. Eva Delmont. She had a forged ID to prove it. A coffee shop job down the street. A dead phone. A new life. So why did it feel like the past had beaten her there? She washed her face, the water ice cold as if trying to jolt herself into some form of presence. When she stood again, she dried her face slowly and walked to the window. The house across the street. The curtains remained closed, but there was something odd about it. Not in the house itself, but in her reaction to it. Like something underneath memory was squirming. She stared for a long while, chewing on her bottom lip. Then something in her shifted. Snap! A thread broke. Her limbs moved before she thought it through. She dressed in something clean, ran a comb through her hair, and put on makeup not for beauty but to mask the restlessness clawing at her skin. She needed control. She needed to know. By the time she stepped outside and crossed the street, she had already constructed 5 different explanations in her head. Maybe it was just a neighbor. A harmless man. Maybe he just reminded her of someone. Jonah. Silas. The confusion between the two had never truly left her. The duality. The impossible resemblance. The way her memory folded over itself whenever she thought of them too long. But maybe. Just maybe. She knocked on the door of the house across the street. No answer. She waited. Knocked again. Still silence. She looked down. The doormat was slightly crooked as if recently stepped on. Her eyes darted to the mailbox, unopened, but the nameplate was blank. No identity. Just an address. Still, something about the atmosphere, it was too still. Too clean. Like someone had tried to erase all trace of a former life and start anew. Just like her. And then she noticed something pressed faintly behind the curtain. A shadow. Someone was inside. Watching. She stepped back. Whoever they were hiding. And now Marian needed to know why. She returned to her home, but her pulse raced with a rhythm too close to panic. The house across the street no longer felt like a coincidence. It felt like a message. And Marian, no, Eva, was about to find out who dared to follow her into her carefully built oblivion. Chapter 13. The Sunday sun was bright and unrelenting, stretching over the narrow street like a watchful eye. The smell of baked goods and grilled meat drifted through the air as residents set up folding tables and mismatched lawn chairs near the small community garden. Eva stood at her window for a long moment before stepping out. She wore a soft yellow dress, one she hadn't touched in months. It wasn't quite her, or Marian's. But today, she needed the illusion. She painted her lips with a light tint and pinned her hair back, giving herself the face of someone sociable, someone normal. The flyer Mrs. Alden had given her was already in the trash. As she stepped outside and approached the gathering, she caught fragments of conversation. The clink of glasses, children's laughter, the faint notes of an old jazz song from a Bluetooth speaker propped up on a windowsill. The air smelled human, felt foreign. It had been years since she stood in a crowd without watching for familiar faces in fear. But today she did, eyes subtly searching. And then she saw him. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks again. The way her memories seemed to play on loop, rearranging themselves, twisting timelines, changing names. The man stood by the lemonade table holding a cup in one hand and chatting with Mrs. Alden. He was tall, with dark, softly curled hair and wore a clean button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans. Silas, her mind whispered. But she blinked. And he wasn't Silas. Or was he? Eva? Mrs. Alden called out with a warm wave. Come meet a few neighbors. She crossed the street slowly, cautiously, like a sleepwalker nearing the edge of a roof. Everyone, this is Eva Delmont. She offered a shy smile. Hello. The elderly woman gestured to the man beside her. And this here is Joseph Grange. Works late hours, so you almost never see him, but he's lived across from you since early spring. Hi, the man said. His voice was deep, even, and kind. Nice to finally meet you. Eva stared at him. Too long. Likewise, she said quietly, forcing herself to look away. Joseph. Joseph. Not Silas. But the slope of his nose. The shape of his eyes. The quiet way he scanned people like he was reading them from the inside out. It was Silas. It had to be. Unless none of it ever really happened. The thought struck her like a cold stone against her temple. She stood stiffly as others began talking, introducing themselves, joking about how the gathering was long overdue. We've lived beside each other for years and barely exchanged names, one man said. It took Mrs. Alden 3 rounds of fruitcake bribery to get us to show up. Someone passed her a paper plate with pie and a cookie on top. She nodded her thanks, but the sugary scent made her nauseous. Across the group, Joseph, if that was really his name, smiled lightly as someone spoke to him. She watched how he moved, how he nodded, how he didn't look at her again. But it was there. The pull. The buried current underneath skin and memory. Who was he? Who was Silas? Eva closed her eyes for a second. She tried to rewind her mind. But all she found were fragmented scenes, conversations half-remembered, letters she thought they exchanged. But when she truly searched for them, tried to recall the shape of the words or where she stored them, she found nothing but fog. Had she ever written him? Had he? Was it all part of the narrative she wrote in her grief? Her guilt? Maybe she had imagined it all. Maybe Silas never existed at all. Or maybe he was standing right in front of her, under a different name, with a different life, and the mask was simply better this time. I work in security, Joseph said to a small cluster of neighbors. Systems management. Lots of late nights, and I mostly keep to myself. Not a recluse, just burnt out. Mrs. Alden laughed. That explains why we never see your lights until past midnight. Occupational hazard, he replied smoothly. He's lying, Eva thought, heart-pounding. She didn't know how or why, but she was sure of it. The pie sat untouched in her hand. The jazz song crackled, then shifted into something slower. Joseph glanced toward her then. Just a flicker of a glance. Their eyes met, and in that second, the rest of the world dissolved. Her skin prickled. Her body remembered what her mind could not. He looked away first. Eva excused herself moments later, murmuring about needing a drink, and disappeared into the edges of the garden. Her heart thudded in her chest like it wanted to scream. She wasn't paranoid. Not this time. Because she knew that look. That carefully hidden recognition. The house across the street. The shadow behind the curtain. The absence of any real background to Joseph. And the most terrifying part? She couldn't decide if he had come to hurt her. Or to finish what they both started years ago. Chapter 14. The days passed in strange shapes. She kept to her quiet rituals, morning tea in a chipped porcelain cup, a slow walk around the block pretending she was the kind of woman who found peace in things like flowerbeds and birdsong. In truth, she lived on edge, watching patterns, faces, waiting for the lie in her mind to match the one outside. The nights brought the dreams again. Of Claire's voice, of Jonah's betrayal, of blood on her hands that felt at once foreign and intimate. And then the window again. The window she couldn't stop watching. Every day she sat in her favorite spot, the curtain drawn slightly, the steam from her cup ghosting the glass. Across the street was his window. Joseph's. The man who wasn't Silas but also maybe was. She couldn't say anymore. She kept a journal now. But the ink betrayed her too. Sometimes her own handwriting felt like someone else's. She wrote. For 12 p.m. He came home. He had a briefcase. Looked tired. For 12 p.m. No briefcase today. Different shirt. Maybe not him. For 12 p.m. He never leaves before this. Always something happens at 4:12. Why? It became an obsession, that minute. So, when the clock struck 4:12 p.m. on a strange, gray Tuesday and something did happen, she wasn't surprised, but her breath still caught in her throat. People. Movers, she realized. 2 men carried out a modest desk. Another brought down boxes. Laughter echoed from one of them. She stood, pressing her hand to the window, peeking just beyond the edge of the curtain. And there he was, Joseph, standing by the door, phone to his ear, his expression taut and distant. He paced a little, one hand rubbing the back of his neck, glancing toward the moving van as if calculating time, weight, urgency. Was he leaving? A bolt of panic stirred in her gut. She grabbed a coat, she didn't remember which one, and stepped outside before her thoughts could catch up. The air smelled like dust and rain, heavy with the scent of cardboard and diesel. As she crossed the street, the closer she got, the more surreal it felt. Like walking into the wrong end of a memory. Joseph was finishing his call. He looked up and saw her. His face rearranged itself smoothly into a smile. "Eva," he greeted, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Didn't expect to see you." She smiled too, though her lips felt stiff. "You're moving." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Yeah, got a transfer. My job wants me closer to the main office. Bigger building, more responsibility, more paperwork. You know, the usual." She tilted her head slightly. "That's sudden." Joseph nodded. "Not really, but I didn't tell many people. I keep to myself." "Still," she said softly, "I scanning the boxes, it's sad. We only just met." There was a beat, a strange moment of tension that neither of them acknowledged. But she saw it, just the faintest crack in his gaze before he blinked it away. "I suppose that's life," he replied. "People come and go." Her throat tightened. "Some people don't," she murmured, unsure if she meant it as a threat or a memory. He studied her for a moment, almost too intently, then gestured to the moving van. "They'll be done soon. I've only got a few more things left." Eva smiled again, too brightly. "Well, don't be a stranger. We're neighbors, after all. For a few more hours." Joseph hesitated. "Right? Of course." Then he turned away to speak with the movers. Eva stood there a moment longer. "He's really leaving?" That wasn't how it was supposed to go. She stepped back from the curb, glanced once more at the house across the street, the one that had become her obsession, her compass in this ever-spinning world of fractured memory. For a second, she thought she saw movement in the upper window. But it was empty. Of course it was. She walked slowly back to her house. The sky began to drizzle. As she shut the door behind her, something inside her stirred, not panic, but urgency. If he was truly leaving, then this was her last chance. To know the truth. Or destroy it before it could leave her behind. Chapter 15. Midnight wrapped the neighborhood in quiet. All the lights had gone out. All except one, or so she thought. From her window, Eva watched the house across the street, her breath fogging up the glass. The moving truck was long gone. Joseph had said goodbye. Pleasant. Polite. But something didn't feel right. It gnawed at her like an itch beneath the skin. That look in his eyes. The way his hand trembled when he mentioned the transfer. The twitch in his jaw. It wasn't closure. It was something else. So she waited. Waited until the world slept. Until the trees whispered only to each other and not to her. At 2:07 a.m. she slipped on a dark coat and crossed the street like a shadow. The back gate wasn't locked. The house looked lifeless, drained, like someone had pulled out its soul and left its bones behind. Her breath caught in her throat as she twisted the doorknob of the back entrance. It clicked open too easily. He didn't lock it. Or maybe he wanted someone to come in. Inside, the house smelled of cardboard, old paper, and faint cologne. Her fingers ghosted over the countertops. The furniture was mostly gone, only impressions in the carpet remained. She searched every room. Closets, drawers, even under the sink. There were no notes, no photographs, no secrets taped behind paintings. Nothing. Ordinary. Maddeningly ordinary. She was starting to question why she came, if it was just another spiral in her unraveling mind, when a sharp snap cracked through the silence. Before she could turn, something heavy struck the back of her head. She awoke to the sterile scent of antiseptic. Her eyes fluttered open but were assaulted by blinding white. Ceiling. Walls. Floor. White. 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 She tried to sit up but couldn't. Her wrists were cuffed to the metal bars of a bed. Her legs were bound too, ankles strapped down with unforgiving leather restraints. Panic bloomed in her chest like fire. The bed wasn't hers. The sheets weren't hers. The room wasn't hers. Where was she? Her heart pounded in her ears. Her breath hitched. Cold sweat dampened her brow as she thrashed and yanked at the cuffs. They didn't budge. "Help," she screamed. "Somebody help me." Her voice echoed off the pristine walls. Silence answered. She tried again, louder, more desperate. The echo came back softer this time, as if the room was swallowing her words. And that's when she noticed the camera. A black eye in the upper corner of the room, watching. Recording. Her mouth went dry. She twisted in place, pulling at the restraints until the cold bite of metal dug into her skin. Nothing. No one came. The walls were blank, the corners too sharp. The air didn't feel right. Like it had been scrubbed of memory, of time, of truth. "Where am I?" she screamed again, her voice breaking this time. "Who are you?" She didn't know who she was yelling at. Joseph? Silas? Jonah? Or maybe herself. She tried to retrace her steps. The house. The knock to her head. Then this. White. So white it hurt. The gown she was wearing clung to her like paper. Thin. Cold. Stripped of identity. No rings, no hair ties. No sign she'd ever been someone named Marion or Eva. Just a patient. A number, probably. She looked to the camera again. What do you want from me? She whispered. No answer. Her mind spun like a broken clock. Had she gone too far? Had she fallen into some trap? Or was this what she'd always been running from? She squeezed her eyes shut. Flashes of Claire's face. Of Jonah's scream. Blood in her hands. A knife. The cliff. No. No. That was then. That was a dream. Or was it? She looked down at the faint scar on her palm. A half-moon sliver. She didn't remember how she got it. The door to the white room remained shut. No handle on her side. No noise outside. Not even a whisper. Then she heard it. A faint buzz. Electric. Soft. The camera above her blinked red. Someone was watching. And they were waiting. Chapter 16. The door finally opened. With a hiss of air and a soft, controlled click, the smooth white panel slid into the wall. Marion's head jerked toward the sound, breath still ragged from screaming. Footsteps echoed in deliberate rhythm measured calm to calm. And then he walked in. Joseph. Same tired but pleasant face. Same half-smile that once made her unsure whether to trust him or suspect him. His hair was neatly combed, his dark blue shirt tucked into gray slacks. A clipboard in his hand. A badge clipped to his belt. But his presence felt different now. It wasn't Joseph the neighbor who stood before her. It was Joseph the officer. Good evening, Marion, he said, voice smooth but firm, measured like a practiced script. Or should I say Eva? You've used a few names over the years. She blinked. Her body still felt numb. Why am I here? What is this place? You're safe, he replied calmly. But detained. This is a secure psychiatric holding center. You were deemed a flight risk after several unusual sightings. So we couldn't afford another incident. She shook her head slowly, the words not connecting. Sightings? What do you mean? Joseph stepped closer, eyes never wavering from hers. You were reported. Someone saw you at the mall talking to thin air. At first, we thought it was just another stressed woman having a moment. But when we ran a few background checks and compared your photo to the archives, the resemblance was uncanny. Too uncanny. No, she whispered. That wasn't. I was talking to Claire. He didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head. Claire, your best friend. The one you stabbed 10 years ago. Her chest caved in around her lungs. She was there, Marion insisted. She said she forgave me. She smiled. She touched my hand. No one saw her but you, Joseph replied gently, flipping a page on his clipboard. The security cameras caught you sitting alone, whispering to yourself for over 20 minutes. Laughing, crying, reaching out to nothing. Her mouth opened but no words came. Her body turned cold. Joseph let the silence settle before continuing. After that report, the case was reopened. Quietly. We couldn't be sure you changed your name, altered your appearance, moved from city to city. But we had a few breadcrumbs. And then someone remembered you. He gave a half nod, a small gesture of respect almost. The plan was simple. Slow. Quiet. We integrated into the neighborhood. Your neighbors weren't informed of your past, just that we were investigating someone unstable. We didn't want to scare anyone or tip you off. The block gathering? Our idea. We interviewed each resident individually under the pretense of city planning surveys. She thought back to the elderly woman's knock. The pamphlet. The smiles. All masks. All of it, she whispered. A trap. A precaution, Joseph corrected, calm but sharp. After everything that happened with Claire and Jonah. His name cut through her like a serrated edge. Jonah is dead, isn't he? She asked, breath hitching. Joseph's expression shifted slightly, tightening at the edges. His body was never recovered. You confessed before you fled. Your story was riddled with holes, but enough remained to hold up in court. She remembered the cliff. His blood. The rain. But he loved Claire, she muttered. He wasn't supposed to leave me. I did everything for him. Joseph stood motionless. It was never about hurting them, Marion went on. I just wanted to be loved back. You wanted control, he said, not unkindly. And you lost it. She glared at him. So what now? You take me to trial? Make me perform for a jury? Play the madwoman part? Joseph didn't blink. You'll undergo due process, but not by your request. Her stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means, he said, turning toward the door, you will remain here until the proper agencies decide how to proceed. You'll be observed, evaluated, possibly medicated. The trial will happen when it happens. He didn't tell her when. He didn't even say goodbye. Just walked out as the door hissed shut behind him with a click, the sound of finality. Alone again. The silence pressed in from all corners of the room. Marion leaned her head back against the pillow. Her wrists ached. Her body felt like it didn't belong to her anymore. Claire was there. Wasn't she? She remembered the feel of her hand. The warmth in her laugh. The words whispered like apologies. Or were they accusations? What if Claire wasn't a ghost? What if Claire was what was left of her conscience? Or worse, what if she never left? The camera blinked red again. She looked up at it and smiled. But this time her smile didn't reach her eyes. Then the door opened again. This time a doctor came to check on her as well. He asked questions to Marion and led her to some machines checking everything. She just lay there waiting and following instructions like a sane woman. Chapter 17. The fluorescent lights above flickered for a second before returning to their sterile glow. It has already been a week since her arrest and the doctors constantly ask her questions and do check UPS while heavily guarded. Marion, no, Eva, lay awake on the stiff bed, eyes wide, heart strangely quiet as if something deep within her had already accepted whatever was to come. The door to her holding room creaked open. A uniformed man stepped in without a word, followed by two others in plain suits. One of them carried a clipboard. The other, a small, folded bundle of clothing. Time, one of them said curtly. She was wheeled out, wrists still cuffed and ankles lightly bound, her body wrapped in a regulation robe as they pushed her into a private room. There, two female guards changed her into a modest but clean dress, plain beige with long sleeves. They brushed her hair back into a simple ponytail, then strapped her into a secure wheelchair. The metal clicked and locked with finality. A silence fell over them as they guided her through a maze of pale, cold hallways. Each turn felt like a farewell. Her skin prickled. Her chest stayed hollow. Then into a police car. After a while they stopped and they wheeled her inside. And then the doors opened into light. Too much light. The courtroom. She could feel it before she saw it. The hush. The murmurs. The tension. Then the eyes. Rows and rows of people. Strangers, reporters, even distant faces from the past. All turned to her as she was wheeled inside, their gazes piercing like knives. She couldn't count how many. Eyes full of disgust, pity, horror, judgment, but not understanding. Never that. She was placed beside her defense attorney, a young man with tired eyes who had been assigned by the court. Next to him sat a court-appointed psychologist, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard, her eyes more clinical than cruel, and the psychologist from the ward. A judge entered. People stood, then sat again. Case number 0842 CL, the clerk called out. The state versus Marion Alara Crown alias Eva Delmont. Her name. She stared ahead as the proceedings began. Her mind was a blur of legal language and questions. The charges were read out loud: first-degree murder, attempted murder resulting in physical injuries, mental instability evaluation, resisting arrest, identity fraud, and trespassing. Her hands trembled. Then came the psychologist. She was asked to summarize Marion's state from last 10 years' assessment conducted during her first murder and the days during her stay at the psych ward, as well as her video footage from the mall where she's talking to no one and breaking into someone else's home, which luckily the family was on vacation. Marion Crown, or as she came to call herself, Eva, has undergone multiple psychiatric evaluations during the course of her detainment. Based on our findings, she is suffering from a severe case of schizophrenia, marked by auditory hallucinations, visual distortions, and delusions of persecution and grandeur. In addition, her consciousness fractures, splitting reality from fantasy. The room held its breath. She also frequently experiences identity distortion. Eva and Marion are perceived as different people in her mind. Her fixation on the victim, Claire, and the romantic interest, Jonah, became amplified by her delusions. Her mind fabricated scenarios in which Claire became a villain and Jonah was a reward for her loyalty, even obsession. Dr. Spencer paused, flipping a page. There's evidence she began believing Jonah and another man, Silas, were merging, splitting, or watching her. These were manifestations of her own fractured psyche attempting to give form to feelings of guilt and longing. Gasps echoed. Marion stirred. Then her voice cracked the silence. "It's not my fault," she muttered, trembling. Then louder, "Claire took him from me. She needed to pay. She didn't deserve him." Her voice was a serrated scream. "I loved him. And if I couldn't have him, no one could." The judge pounded the gavel as murmurs erupted into shouts. Cameras flashed. The courtroom spiraled into chaos and her lawyer tried desperately to calm her. But Marion only laughed, hysterical, clutching the arms of her wheelchair. "I did what was right. I removed the problem. I did it all for us." Her voice dropped into a near whisper, a sing-song tone filled with eerie innocence. "They tried to trick me, but Silas and Jonah, they knew. They were always watching." The lawyer tried to interject something, a plea for mercy rooted in psychological collapse. But the moment felt fragile. Then Marion stood, or tried to. The shackles prevented much, but her body rose enough to silence the courtroom. "It wasn't my fault," she screamed. Gasps. The bailiff stepped forward, but the judge raised a hand. "Wait." Her voice cracked, wild and trembling, echoing through the room. "Claire took him from me. Jonah was mine first. She didn't care, she never cared. I had to stop her. I had to fix it. I had to." Silence. Horrified silence. She had to pay for it. Her breathing turned erratic. The psychologist glanced down, quietly jotting a note. Then Marion laughed. A soft, high, unhinged sound. And again, louder. None of you get it, do you? She said, teeth bared in something between a grin and a grimace. If I couldn't have Jonah, then no one could. Chaos erupted. Voices rose in panic and disbelief. Phones clicked with flashes. People stood from the benches, some shouting, some crying. The prosecutor looked stunned. The defense attorney slumped in his chair. The confession was too early. Too clean. Too raw. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order, but it was useless now. The truth had already exploded into the room like a gas leak finally igniting. Marion just stared at the people, her lips still curled, the laughter fading as quickly as it had come. Then her gaze fell to the floor. Her expression changed, like she saw something again. Someone, perhaps Claire, perhaps the version of herself that once was. The woman who was kind, whole, loved, but that person was long gone. And what remained sat in the center of the courtroom. Hands shackled, name discarded, future sealed. While the eyes of the world finally saw her, not as Eva, not as the girl who loved too much, but as the woman who loved wrong and never learned how to stop. Epilogue. The trial had left a deep imprint on everyone who witnessed it. Onlookers, victims' families, neighbors, and even strangers who followed the story in newspapers and social feeds. The court, after weeks of psychological evaluations, testimonies, and her startling public confession, found Marion Ilera Crown guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder resulting in multiple injuries compounded by obstruction, false identity usage, and trespassing. Though her mental state was deemed unstable, it didn't absolve her of responsibility. It simply changed her sentence. The judge's final words rang across the hushed courtroom. This court recognizes the defendant's diminished mental capacity. However, the danger she poses to herself and others is unequivocal. Therefore, in accordance with legal and psychiatric advisement, she will be committed indefinitely to a maximum security psychiatric facility with no possibility of release. No parole. No visitors. No contact with the outside world. A quiet cheer rose among the audience, subtle, contained, yet cathartic. Claire's family wept, not because justice had healed their wounds, but because it had at least acknowledged them. Jonah's older sister, his only living relative, held a photo of him in her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. The community felt a strange kind of relief. Justice, though late, had finally arrived. 3 months later, Marion was no longer known as Eva. Her false name was stripped from the records along with all her illusions. Inside the hospital, Ward H to be exact, her days blended into sterile repetition. Pills, meals, surveillance, therapy sessions she barely responded to. A room without sharp edges. A bed bolted to the floor. But her mind never rested. She whispered to shadows. She smiled at corners. She carved invisible words in the air with her fingers. She kept saying Jonah's name, and sometimes Claire's followed by laughter. Other times, just silence. Then, one night, she tried again. They found her pressing a sharpened piece of metal from a broken bed frame into another patient's arm. No one knew how she gotten it or how long she had been hiding it. But her face, void of remorse, humming a soft lullaby, told them enough. That night, a meeting was called. Psychiatrists, senior hospital directors, legal representatives from the Department of State Security. The verdict was grim. She is not treatable. She is a continuous threat, calculated, manipulative, and entirely unpredictable. It is no longer about rehabilitation. It is about containment and protection of life. The recommendation was confidential. It would never reach the public eye. The documents were sealed. The press never knew. And just like that, the decision was made. She was led into a private chamber, white walls, soft chair, dim light. The attending physician didn't speak. The nurses didn't meet her eyes. Marion didn't fight. Maybe she had already known. Maybe she had been waiting. Maybe part of her was already gone. They inserted the needle. A second one followed. A slow-acting sedative. Her eyes blinked. Slowly. And then she saw something. Or someone. Jonah. Standing in the corner of the room. Mature now. Clean-cut. Wearing a suit. Solemn. Handsome. Not smiling. Just watching her. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no sound came. Her breath hitched once. Then again. Her chest rose and fell. And finally, stillness. Not the fresh and kind. Not the erratic, mind-splintered paralysis that had defined her days. But a true, weary quiet. Her mind, once a storm of screams and ghosts, finally rested. They recorded the time. They cleaned the room. They erased the tapes. There would be no announcement. No grave. Marion Ilera Crown was gone. Buried beneath the silence of a system designed to erase dangerous noise. But in the memories of those she scarred, she would remain. Not as a victim. Not even as a monster. But as a warning. Some hearts, when broken, don't shatter. They sharpen. The end. If you like the story, click like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Till next time.